The Dialogue with Clement Manyathela.
It's not just another roundtable discussion.
Let's walk the talk on 702.
Time for our Thursday Dialogue. And this morning on our Thursday Dialogue, we're having quite an important conversation. I think, conversation that we probably need to have more often. And I do know that some of you feel a little uncomfortable with conversations like this. But it's okay. We'll get there where we will be fine to have these conversations, because these conversations doesn't mean we hate each other. These are conversations about our reality, right? And we can have different realities. We can agree, we can disagree, but I'm not going to stop having conversations on this show because there are some people that feel uncomfortable about them. There are conversations that are uncomfortable to me, but I still have them because I know how important they are in nation building, in our coexistence. And I'm saying this because I always see this on the WhatsApp line, where whenever I have conversations about race relations or people start calling me names, you should see just when I introduce this chat at 9 o'clock, what people are saying about me on the WhatsApp line. So if you are feeling triggered by this conversation, it's okay for you to maybe take a bit of a break. But as I've said before and many times, these are important conversations, right? About nation building. These are important conversations about our coexistence, and I'm going to keep having them as often as all of us can. The conversation we're having this morning is about the role of Afrikaners towards nation building. What should their role be? How do you, maybe as an Afrikaner that's been struggling with your identity post, right, 1994, how do you find your path within this democratic South Africa? You know about AfriForum that has been in the US, championing a narrative in the US that Afrikaners are under threat. And as I said to you earlier, I want to recommend this opinion piece. If you haven't read it, it was so fascinating that I've really sent it to everybody close to me because I thought it's so important. It's an opinion piece by Dr Louise Van Rhyn. It was in the Sunday Times just this past Sunday, titled "We Need a New Afrikaner Story, Letting Go of Fear and Embracing Belonging." And in that opinion piece, she speaks about the narratives of alienation, of displacement, of victimhood, and nostalgia for the past that are now resurfacing, and you're seeing it through even what AfriForum is trying to do. And she says she believes in a South Africa where Afrikaners do not have to be in charge to feel like they belong. And maybe you want to join this conversation. Maybe you are an Afrikaner and you're thinking, I do feel like I don't belong. What is it for you that you think makes you feel you don't belong? Or maybe you are an Afrikaner that feels, whenever I look at what AfriForum are advancing as a narrative, that's not something I relate with. And I worry about that. Give us a call as well. I want you to join this conversation. And let's talk about what role that Afrikaners can play towards this nation building in a new South Africa. The number to dial is 011-883-0702. The WhatsApp line is 072-702-1702. My guests this morning for this chat, we've got Johan Erasmus, who's the co-founder of Betereinders. Am I saying it right, Johan?
Beter. It's such an important E. It really changes it from bitter to better.
Yeah.
So Betereinders.
Betereinders, thank you so much for making time for us. We also have Dr Louise Van Rhyn, who's the leadership development expert and social justice activist, joining us as well. Dr. Van Rhyn, thank you so much for making time as well. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you, Clement. Your courage is palpable.
Yeah, if we don't have this courage, Dr. Van Rhyn, then what country are we going to have? I think these are really important conversations, as uncomfortable as they can be. And I want to start off with you, Dr. Van Rhyn, because I thought your opinion piece was just on point. I mean, it made me think about things that I was not even realizing, as I was rationalizing what's going on in our country, what's going on even with actions by AfriForum in the US. And I want us to start there. What do you think is so difficult about some Afrikaners, because it's not all of them, what is it so difficult about just accepting the reality in the democracy today, which then contradicts where they come from? What do you think is the problem here?
So I think, Clement, Tuli Maronzela and Pumla Gobodo-Madikizela has been helping all of us to realize that when you have to give up privilege, it feels like oppression. Most Afrikaners, and I have to be careful because I'm, in my 60s now, so I'm not maybe my generation had a different experience. My generation of Afrikaners grew up with a sense of superiority that was, Jonathan Jansen says it was in our blood, and he's right. It was heartbreaking for me when I realized that I'm one of those generations of people who did think when we grew up that we are special, we are God's chosen nation who has been sent to Africa to bring light to this dark continent. I mean, even if I say those words, I know how that must feel for you to hear that, and I apologize, and I'm saying this because I think we have to wrestle, we Afrikaners have to wrestle with, that's our history. And now we're in this country that we are committed to for the long run, and we have to figure out how to work together as in equality, rather than some of us being more special and, than others.
And I love that in your article, by the way, and people will check this out when they read it. I mean, you go into the history of the Dutch Reformed Church as well, and how what was preached there was to, again, advance this narrative of Afrikaners as superior here to save this dark continent. But you guys can go read more about that in that opinion piece. Erasmus, I know you guys have called on for white South Africans, Johan, to refrain from victimhood. One, what do you make of the actions by AfriForum? And when you talk about victimhood, what do you mean?
So on the one hand, I would say, and this might be a controversial thing to say. Maybe I'm not so sophisticated as Dr. Van Rhyn, but I've been somewhat annoyed with how every group in the world has been playing the victim card over the last couple of years. And I've likened the world to soccer players who are constantly diving in their penalty box to try and win penalties. And I'm ashamed to say that I think the Afrikaners has won that victimhood Olympics. So I want to be fair to the Afrikaner and say that there are people who's been disillusioned and on the receiving end of BEE legislation. I've heard some horror stories, and I've experienced it a little bit, I guess. And that is a form of, victimization, if you want. Okay, bear with me. I know people who have had somebody killed on the farm, and that's terrible. It's terrible when those things happen. I think my problem is that if you put our pain and just our pain on the one hand, and you make that the whole hand, you make that the whole message that you are telling people, then those truths, which you're not lying, becomes half truths, becomes false when it's just presented by itself. South Africa is a complex country. It is a country that's hurt by a history of hurt. So we need to put white pain, if you want to call it white pain, and I will, disillusionment, whatever. You have to put it against this other bigger narrative. And I think when you do that statistically, you're going to struggle to make a case that Afrikaners are being victimized in South Africa. And that's why I think the whole idea of refugee status in the United States is absolutely ridiculous. And it's very sad that this is not the first time. Australia at one point considered to give us refugee status. This is a narrative that has gotten out of hand.
Yeah. And I want you to come in on that, Dr. Van Rhyn, and speak more about the history of Afrikaners maybe as victims, because you brilliantly just position and frame that well in your opinion piece. When you talk about, them as descendants of the Dutch, the French, the German settlers, and how they were able to forge this strong cultural identity. And that happened through hardship. It happened through survival, first under the British colonial rule, and then later through conflicts with indigenous communities. Just help the listeners understand that history of victimhood.
No, when I hear you describe it like that, again, Clement, this is many decades, but we're in a different world now. The Afrikaners claiming victimhood now, given what we are. I mean, I have not listened to Ernst's interview with Tucker Carlson because I just can't do it to myself.
I can't do it too. So my friends this morning have been saying, have you watched? And I said, I made a decision that I'm not going to trigger myself like that. I'm not watching that.
So but I've been reading what people say, and I've been reading responses to that interview. And I mean, the story about white genocide, and people are constantly feeling, living in fear. And I, through the work that I do, I spend a lot of time working with people in really dangerous areas. I mean, if you grow up in Capricorn on the Cape Flats or in Heiderveld or one of those places, you are genuinely in fear of your life every single day. Going to work is dangerous to do. Sending your children out to go to the shop is dangerous. Most Afrikaners do not have any of that. So to hold on to a story of victimhood in 2025 in South Africa is just disingenuous, and I think it's a strategy to get attention. It's not true. And what's been interesting for me, and I'm sure that's true for the Betereinders as well, is that because we are now finally speaking out, for a long time, I personally have not said what I wanted to say because I didn't want to be called a volksverraaier, and I didn't want to be thrown with rotten apples, and I didn't want to, but actually it's time now. It's time to say, no, you are not speaking for all of us. There is a large number of people and that the response to this article on Sunday was amazing because hundreds of people have contacted me and said, I feel like you do. I'm ashamed by the story that's being told about South Africa now in the international media because AfriForum wants to make a point.
Yeah. But Dr. Van Rhyn, do you think that this comes from, because I do think when you look at our history that victimhood was weaponized. And I mean, look at the Anglo-Boer War, for instance. I mean, that was a defining moment. Even the Second War, when the British, we had the concentration camps as well, that devastated the Afrikaner families. And that experience somehow brought them together and fostered resilience, just self-reliance and resistance to external domination, while though, on the other hand, reinforcing that sense of victimhood, which later on we see, and you talk about this in the opinion piece, we see that narrative being weaponized by the nationalist leaders. Is that where we can draw to try and rationalize it and say, oh, okay, maybe there is this level of desperation to want to, again, keep the Afrikaner community together because we know where we come from, we know how we were treated, and therefore we're trying to preserve as much of this identity and culture as possible?
So I have to work incredibly hard to be sympathetic to that position because I believe that we have a choice. Every time we tell a story, we have a choice. So we can tell a story about victimhood in South Africa for the Afrikaner, which is just it's part of a strategy, or we can actually open our eyes and look at what an amazing reality is there for Afrikaners. I want to make a very specific point. I'm involved in the University of Stellenbosch, and Stellenbosch is one of the it used to be an Afrikaans university. I studied there when it was purely Afrikaans and white. And there are many Afrikaners who feel Stellenbosch is ours and all these other people should stay away because it's ours.
Yeah.
But thank goodness there are many others who say, no, this is a national asset and we must share it and we must. And there's a new generation of people who are coming to a university like Stellenbosch, Afrikaners, so excited about being part of a diverse environment and not having to be held back by that lager mentality. And I do not want to be judgmental or critical. All I want to say is that if I look at what is the future that I want for my children, I never sent them to public or to private schools because I wanted them to experience the real South Africa. And when they decided to go to Stellenbosch, I was overjoyed because in Stellenbosch they were going to get a complete mix, the complete diversity. And that's what Afrikaners are invited to think about now is that at the time of holding on to being special and living in a little enclave, I mean, we have Orania. So Orania is always an option. People can go and live in Orania if they really, really, really feel that they can't deal with people other than that's different from them. The rest of us are loving the diversity, and we feel so privileged to live in a country with so much diversity, where we are challenged to think about our assumptions every single day, and we're not getting stuck in a particular way of being.
Yeah, Johan, what impact do you think the portrayal of Afrikaners as victims has on social cohesion in South Africa? One of the saddest things I've seen is how what Trump said, and I tried to warn the listeners about this a few weeks ago, that let's be very careful here, because what Trump is also trying to do, I don't think he actually cares about Afrikaners in this country. He's doing this for political reasons. But we need to be careful so that this doesn't take us down the path of the racial divide we've seen, where on social media you just see the terrible things that black and white people are saying towards each other. We have made progress in our race relations, and we have a man who's sitting in America who makes decisions based on disinformation, and then that takes us on a terrible path of division. What impact have you seen yourself in your observation?
No, I don't want to be alarmist, but I think we've gone back a few years. And I know that many black and white people do not like this example, but I think what Sia and Rassi and those guys did was amazing. And how that united. And I remember, Sia when with the acceptance speech, and even Rassi in that chasing the sun. I'm an Afrikaner, so obviously rugby, it connects. And the way he spoke was just, Rassi has this famous quote where he just says, guys, now when you go back to South Africa and somebody talks ugly word, because there are a lot of ugly words about the country, just call that guy aside and tell him, hey, stop talking ugly word about this country. Come on, we can make a plan. We can do this. And there was just such a force behind it. You see Afrikaans boys playing rugby, and then when you ask them, who are you? They say, I'm Siya Kolisi. I'm Kirtley Arendse. They pretend to be these black players. I've got this one story where this little boy, his dad organized that he's going to meet Andre Pollard, the Springbok fly-off. He's very excited about it, and there's the great reveal. Here he is, and the guy says, and he asked the boy, who is this? And he says, this is Andre Pollard. Andre, do you know Cheslin Colby? He's not very excited about the Afrikaans player. He wants to talk about the colored player. That's his idol. So they were amazing games, not just in rugby, not just there. And I think these old wounds were scratched open. Maybe one thing that I would say is that when white people just talk about white victimhood, then somehow it just reinforces those old divides that we have. And perhaps one of the ways out of this is for white people to also be concerned about black victimhood. So now white people are talking about their victimization. And let me just be clear, I think farm murders is an issue. I think we need to prioritize rural safety. But to say that there's this, or to create the idea, because AfriForum would say they never used the word white genocide, but I think at least the impression has been created loud and clear. Then statistically, if you're a black person in South Africa, you are more likely to be murdered than I am. And this is not, I've heard a lot of people say that's because they are more, I know how statistics work. It's per capita. Okay. So we can work that out. If we say that white people are being marginalized in the economy, yes, BE can be abused, and it has been abused. But the fact of the matter is that white families are 4 times richer than black families. When I say that to many white people, they say that that's a rubbish claim. It's statistics they say. You can say that they're making it up, but also just...
Because they see a politician who's driving a fancy car, but that's just a politician. Yeah. The average South African doesn't live that life.
Yeah, and you can be angry towards the politician.
Rightly so.
So please be angry towards the politician. But I think a simple life audit for Louise, for myself, will reveal that, we've got problems. I do not want to dismiss that we've got problems in this country. But by and large, man, we are living the life.
Yeah. How do you, before we take some headlines and take some calls, Johan, how do you think the Afrikaner identity should evolve to align with this democratic and inclusive South Africa? And do you think it's even possible for us to get there? What is it going to get us to get there? And I think these conversations we have, Louise and with you, are probably a step there away, because I do know there are people who listen. Yes, there are people who will call me racist for having a chat like this, but I know there are people who listen, who will write an email and say, thank you for that conversation because it actually made me see things differently. How do we get there to say to Afrikaners that when we talk about equality, don't see that as an oppression? Yes, it may have been your reality in the past that you were dominating, that you were seen and told you are inferior. But we're in a democratic South Africa, we have to coexist and we're all equal. The black person is not more inferior than you and more superior than you. You are not more superior than anyone else. How do we get there?
So,
I know it's a difficult question.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't have an answer to that.
That's why we. So for me, one of the issues, and I'm sorry, your listeners are definitely going to call me sentimental and other names, and maybe I deserve it. But in apartheid, we spoke about die swart gevaar. Even today, you blacks, are talking about whiteness, white monopoly capital, and it's almost a placeholder for something like that. When we are just talking about the blacks and when we are not just talking about the whites, it's always going to be scary. In our work at Betereinders, when we take someone and we say that person is not just black, it's Clement. He's got a story. He's got a face. It just takes the pain and the harshness out of the word. And I think Afrikaners are fearful. We can bash the Afrikaners. We can bash AfriForum. It's very fashionable at the moment. I can tell you I've got friends there. I studied at Potchefstroom University. These guys who are top there, they were my roommates. They were around me. And here's the thing, I still love those guys. But I think there is a sense of fear. There's always been a sense of fear in the Afrikaner. That is why the public spaces in Joburg is being used. It's multicultural. In Pretoria, it's not being used. Why? Because there are black people. This is dangerous. We have to move away. And it's not just racism. It's like real fear, and we need to talk about that. We need to talk about that fear. But once we bridge that, here's what I have found. I am an Afrikaner. I come from that story, and I'm still an Afrikaner. I'm not ashamed of it. I've got a red beard. I look Afrikaner. My English is bad, etc. But I have found with diversity, by moving across the room and interacting and making black friends, I didn't become less of an Afrikaner. I became more of an Afrikaner. All of a sudden, they pointed out how Afrikaans I am in ways that I didn't even realize, mocking my fashion sense, telling me that I'll never have the confidence of an Afrikaner to walk barefoot in the mall. And so, I don't know, that's an Afrikaans thing that I do. So what I have found, somebody who didn't really identify very much as like a super Afrikaner. I was like a moderate Afrikaner. I've become more Afrikaner. Here in the studio, you guys are all black. I'm the Afrikaner here. So I think we fear that we're going to lose. But my experience is that through integrating, I've become more of an Afrikaner, not less.
Love that. It's 11:33 now.
Let's walk the talk.
The Dialogue with Clement Manyathela.
It's not just another roundtable discussion.
Let's walk the talk on 702.
23 minutes before 12 o'clock on our Thursday Dialogue this morning. We're having an important conversation. I can already see. I'm enjoying it so much that I already want the part 2 of this chat before it's even done. But before we go to your calls, Hank, Barry, Sipo, I see your calls. I'm going to come to you in a moment. I just want to get Dr. Van Rhyn to also weigh in here. I think, Dr. Van Rhyn, you wanted to come in there to supplement the point that Johan was making. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was bursting to speak. Clement, we returned as a family from the UK. We lived in the UK, returned to South Africa in 2005. And I was really struggling to find my space. And I'm telling you the story because it links to what Johan was saying. And because I was struggling to find my space and really South Africa felt alien and I didn't know how to be in this country. Long story, I created a program called Partners for Possibility, where people like Johan and me were partnered in a collaborative partnership with a school principal. And most of the business leaders were white, some black, but all of the school principals were black. And then these two people were working together in the trenches, in the school, to mobilize community and strengthen active citizenship and leadership in the school. And I cannot tell you what value this was for these white leaders who felt a bit alienated, and now they had a place, they had a community, and they could contribute. So I think it's about creating more opportunities for us to do things together, which is why people who are in the workplace have such benefit, because most of our workplaces are totally diverse now. So if you work in any of the large corporates, this is not an issue because you're constantly surrounded by people who are very different from you. But people who are not in corporates might suffer from being in a lager, who was, same people going to the same church and the same school and the same kind of local cafe, and they're not getting out enough. And because of the way that people live, so many of Afrikaner people live in white communities, mostly white communities. And then they isolated. And that's so sad.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to some calls now. Please come join this conversation on 011 883 0702. You can send a WhatsApp voice note on 072 702 1702. We're having a conversation this morning on our Thursday dialogue about also the Afrikaner identity. What role do you think Afrikaners can play towards nation building? Are you maybe an Afrikaner who feels, I'm scared, I'm fearful in this post-democratic South Africa. I'm fearful about my own culture, my own identity, my own place in this democratic country. I want you to join this chat. Tell us what exactly you are concerned about. This is a safe space for everyone. 011 883 0702. Hank, you are calling us from Pretoria. Good morning.
Good morning, Clement, and the guest there. Yeah, I think in principle, and again, I can't talk on behalf of Afrikaans speaking of Afrikaners. The majority of us feel that we are South Africans first, and then we also have a culture of Afrikanerism, that whatever that is called. Of course, it is that, but we are South Africans first. I think the thing that frustrates us, let's use that word, is if something is working, railroads, whatever, and I'm not talking apartheid, I'm talking in the distant past.
Yeah.
Things were working, and then over a period of time it declined, and that is I think the biggest frustration we have, and that's not impacting on us, it's impacting on South Africa, but that creates the narrative that something in South Africa is not working, there's problems, and whatever the case may be. So I think that is definitely where a part of the frustration comes from in terms of that. And the last point I want to make is the narrative that all Afrikaners support Trump.
Yeah.
It's not true. I mean, I'm not going to say the word, but so in our family, there's differences. So it's not a thing about race. It is within my family. Some people support him, and myself don't support him. So I think we must go back to basics, make things work. The state-owned entities, those type of things. If we can get that working again, and everybody will benefit, and then we can get away from this narrative that the Afrikaner is different or whatever. It's not the truth.
Yeah, Hank in Pretoria, thank you so much for your thoughts. Barry, you're in Vereeniging. What do you think? Hi.
Good morning, Clement. How are you?
I'm all right, man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm a first-time listener, but I listen to you every day.
Thank you. First-time caller, you mean? Yeah.
First-time caller, yeah. To your show. I've spoken to Rebecca, but yeah, first time to you.
Thank
but
you.
I love listening to your program, and I mean you're very outspoken, and I love it. I mean, I'm a white 44-year-old citizen, whatever you want to call South Africa. And the thing is, I just want to say, I mean, this whole thing about Trump, I mean, and South Africans, I'm a AfriForum member, but I don't stand with them. I mean, I personally feel that why do you want to leave your country? Why do you want to? I mean, everybody has got differences, and I mean, why work? Why can't we work around it? I mean, I've got black friends. I've been at the end of the apartheid, so I didn't go through the apartheid thing, but I mean, I know about it, and I personally just think that we can all just work together. I mean, why do you want to make a thing about race? Because, I mean, like the one of your guests mentioned, I mean, once you start saying it's not a black person, it's Clement, then it changes the whole perspective. I mean, then you put a face to it, and that's a person with their own identity. And it's not a race thing anymore. I think if a lot of white people can just start thinking in that context, then, I mean, their mindset will change. And I mean, we all can work together. Why do you want to run out of your country and just go there because there's an opportunity? If you've got your country here, why not make it work?
Yeah. Barry, thank you so much for your thoughts. Sipho in Mdeni, Soweto, what are your thoughts? Good morning.
Morning, Manyathela.
Sure.
Yes. So my contribution today, it's very simple and straightforward. Mr. Manyathela, the Afrikaners, they have a big role to play in this country. As black as I am, in my industry, I'm in construction. I've got Afrikaners mentors who took me to where I am today. And we should not forget that not all Afrikaners are as bad as... Yes, we have those typicals like Eugene Chepranch, which may so rest in peace. But at the end of the day, we have Afrikaners who have contributed a lot and music to this country. You know, SAA Technical, most people don't know, was the best technical in the world during the apartheid days, which I don't glorify apartheid, but they built so many like ISCO. We had ISCO in the past years. Now today it's called ArcelorMittal, which is going to retrench many people out of their jobs. So the structures were there. Now what was built during those days that I don't glorify was supposed to be a continuation of this government today that we have. But the total decay every day in this country, it's a problem. Hence maybe we're having this attitude towards this government that we have today and having your AfriForums, Solidarity, and the list is endless. That's my contribution.
Thank you for that contribution, Sipho, in Mdeni, Soweto. I'll get Dr. Van Rhyn and Johan to respond. I've got a couple more questions for them as well after this break.
The Dialogue with Clement Manyathela.
It's not just another roundtable discussion.
Let's walk the talk on 702.
12 minutes now before 12 o'clock. Sam, William, Jean-Paul, I see your calls. I'll come to you in a moment. There's a question here to both you, Dr. Van. In fact, let me start with you, Dr. Van Rhyn, about just because when you look at what happened even in the 1990s, right? There are Afrikaners who embraced democracy. In fact, I gave the listeners an example of 1992, that referendum that was taken. 70% of Afrikaners voted for change, you know, signaling that willingness to move towards democracy. What do you think then changed, Dr. Van Rhyn? Because that signaling, to me, when you're voting for that referendum, you also, well, I assume you're saying, I'm also committed to decisions and policies that are going to bring this country forward, and not just a particular group of people, but it's going to bring everybody, black and white, even people that didn't have the opportunities before, and it was legislated that they shouldn't. So what happened, Dr. Van Rhyn?
No, so I think the reality is that the 70% of us have quietly been getting on with it, and we are part of the solution, and we're building our country. The 30% of people who voted no in that referendum, their children are now, you know, the Willem Petzers and Aaron's Roos of what that we are experiencing. So I do think, and Roelt Meyer said that over the weekend. He said those 30% of people are still with us. And that's the reality, is that there were people who were vehemently against this idea because they knew they were going to give up their privilege, and they're still angry. And there's a big, you know, there's a part of me that says, because their numbers are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. If I just look at, you know, what happens in various spheres, their numbers are getting smaller, but they're fighting harder, and then they very cleverly use the media. So the Tucker Carlson interview, you know, one of the most well-known podcasters, and getting on that interview is a wonderful, clever way to strengthen your story and your narrative. But that's why the rest of us have to speak up. I'm delighted, I'm excited about what the Betereinders are doing. We just need many more of us to say, there's a different perspective. And we must also, Tuli Marunzela is always saying to me, you must talk about the work that the Afrikaners are already doing today and how they are involved in creating a better future for everybody and fighting for social justice, because those stories are not being told.
They're not. You're right. They're not. There's a vacuum there, and that's why I'm so happy to see the work that Johan and them are doing, and the work you're doing as well, Dr. Van Rhyn. Johan, for someone listening to us now who is Afrikaner and says, "Oh, now I see. I now get this thing." How do they become change agents in their social circles? Because it's not enough to just sit back and say, "Oh yeah, I get it." But when you're at home during that dinner table, someone says the K word or becomes racist in a way, but you don't say anything. Or when you're at work, there's still decisions that are taken based on race or as a disadvantage to a particular person because of the color of their skin. So in their social circles, how do they become change agents, in your view?
So I think activism has become a very cheap word. It became very fashionable because you're standing in your side and you're criticizing the other side. So it's a white person criticizing the blacks, so to speak. I think it's much harder work to be an activist. But I think if you look at that term, I think at least from a biblical perspective, there I use that term, it always starts with the self. You need to speak hard truths to your own people around that family table. And sometimes it's going to be difficult. But I think it is a wonderful way in which we bring people together, because you're going to fight with them. And I've seen this many times. I've fought and I thought it's the end of the friendship. And then 2 weeks later, I hear the guy using my same arguments, and he was fighting, with claws and nails and whatever. And then 2 weeks later, he's using the arguments that I discussed with him 2 weeks ago. I think the other way is that I think it was Henk was the caller who spoke about Afrikaners being disillusioned with broken infrastructure. I think there are a few things I want to say about that. The first one is, yes, we can see decay, but let's also see. I mean, I'm here in Sandton. I don't visit Sandton very much. There's a sign almost outside that says Afrikaners, approach with caution. But it's big. There's development here. Umhlanga, there's development here. So Cape Town looks completely different than what it looked in 1994. So you can't just say it's just been decay. We've seen also development. So let's be balanced in our analysis. But what I would also say is, what we do as Betereinders is that we fix potholes. We've got a mix that we call gatvol. Not sure if I need to translate that to you. And so this pothole mix that is approved by the National Road Agency is called gatvol, and we say we must stop being gatvol and we must mark the gatvol. In other words, we must fill the hole. And then Henk and his black friend goes and they fix that pothole together. And it's so fun to do that in a place like Pretoria or anywhere, because people are very confused when a white and a black guy fix a pothole together. But it just really takes the sting out of it. Broken infrastructure hurts everyone. I haven't heard a black person who's excited about broken infrastructure. So it doesn't just hurt Afrikaners. It's not just Afrikaners that are disillusioned by that. So that's for me is a way to do it. You can partake in our activities, but do something with them.
Absolutely. Let's quickly go to some calls now. Jean-Paul, thank you for your patience in holding. You in Alberton. Good morning.
Oui, bonjour, Clement.
Bonjour.
Yes, I'm not Afrikaner. I'm French. I came in this country 1971 with qualified toolmaker, Patrick. 4 years in France, and of course, when I came here, I was privileged because the next day or the next week I had a job. So yes, we were privileged because we were qualified. At that time, the apartheid regime, they were looking for qualified people. I retired 12 years ago, and the last 3 years, the company was looking for an operator, which I was in charge of him, and a guy called AB, and myself, another guy called Brian and Ozzy, that's the name, I won't say the surname. We teach that AB, a black guy, young black guy. Today, he's got all his papers because I pushed the management to go to school and all that. Now he's fully control of the tool room. So my point is, some white people give back to society, and that's nice. And like I say, I'm in Alberton. I just want to point out, Alberton is growing. Alberton, where used to be the race course now, is a beautiful mini Sandton. That's what I want to say.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. Merci beaucoup. Let's go to Sam, who's calling from Benoni. Sam, good morning.
Good morning, Clement. I just want to say, as citizens of this country, we are all South Africans. And the ANC doesn't represent all black people. And AfriForum, I believe it doesn't represent all Afrikaners. And I just want to pay homage to the farmers. The farmers, they are so passionate in what they are doing. And they are putting the country first. I mean, like for them, to spend a lot of money in machinery for their agriculture and spending a lot of money in getting medication to keep their animals healthy. So let us try and focus in oneness, not in division.
Absolutely.
And for the possible a marriage between AfriForum and Trump, I just want to advise them to look at a book of Ernest Coates titled House of Bondage. That's when I believe that when they say camera never lies, you look at that book, it tells the true story of how black people were living.
Got it. Sam, thank you for that. William, you'll be our last caller this morning. Good morning. You're in Midlands. Hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, I'll just be quick. So, I was born in '88. But I had a very diverse upbringing. I listened to the show. It was really insightful. Thank you for doing this. And then a question that I had is, or it's more of a comment, I'd say, is the one thing that we overlook, in my opinion, is language, right? Because I've traveled, to different countries, but one place that stood out to me was Israel, because Israel is basically like a smarties box. Everyone looks different, but they all speak Hebrew. But that alone, you can see that people don't stereotype each other. They actually listen to each other when they speak, right? There are some elements where you get Ethiopian refugees or guys from Sudan, where people can tell where you're from. But the language, the fact that people speak one language, same with Rwanda, it actually breaks so many barriers. And my comment is that, I feel like in South Africa, that's something we should explore.
Yeah.
But, that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you. In fact, I'll have a whole conversation about that, William. Just diversity through language and look at the importance of language. Dr. Louise Van Rhyn and Johan Erasmus, thank you so much for making time. I've really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I know a lot of our listeners have as well. It's 2 minutes before 12.